What motivates us? We often act on a daily basis, and we work, and we have to-do list, and we take decisions, and we are going in a direction. But have you ever asked yourself, what's behind that? What's really the root of that? Because I can tell you from experience, when we actually shed light on what are our motivational drivers, sometimes, very often, our actions change because we bring them more into alignment with who we are and the difference that we want to make in the world around us. So today we have Jessica Hartung today, and we talk about what are our motivational drivers, what's really down deep. And she really shares with us some nuggets of questions to ask ourselves to make sure that we are actually acting in alignment with our passion, not the dark side of we have to do this, we should do this, but where do we get back our passion and become more in alignment with passion? Because that is contagious. Let's go to my interview. Jessica, thank you so much for accepting my invitation today.
Sarah, it's a pleasure to be here and, still looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so pre-recording, we had a conversation on this topic. But again, before we get into today's topic, could you take a moment to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm here based in Boulder, Colorado, which has really been a hotbed for entrepreneurship and startups in this area, particularly in the natural foods and in healthcare, in alternative healthcare. And yet, the technology backbone of this area has really been, its main source. And my role has been as a leadership development consultant. I started a firm in 1998 and grew that to work with folks here and across the country, and then transitioned out. And so I know about how connected our identity can be to what we do. So watching my organization thrive under new leadership and ownership is a form of, that conclusion of that journey. But now I'm recreating myself and my own interests. I have a book called The Conscious Professional, which is around how we grow ourselves through work. And now I'm writing and doing other adventures. So particularly important to me, this topic of how we identify with our leadership, because it's so important. It's our purpose, it's our passion, and also it's our danger zone. So I have recovered from chronic fatigue and other challenges that were brought on by that, sort of that question of clarity. Where is it passion and where is it too much?
So let's dig in right up with that. Where is the line between passion and too much? Because I'm an entrepreneur, I coach entrepreneurs. We are passionate people, sometimes to a fault. Sometimes we use it as an excuse. We use it, sometimes it can drive us in a good way, and sometimes it can enslave us.
Yes,
And
yes.
say it's because I'm passionate, but maybe we're not. So where is the line?
Right. And, this is a really interesting, sort of socially acceptable vice.
Yes.
To have, work be such a passion and a compulsion. If we were talking about any other substance, we would all be clear where that line is. And so what I notice in the definitions of things is the word compulsive.
Mm,
So a workaholic is compulsive in their need to continue to work. And this gets into these motivational drivers.
mm,
And the reason they're compulsed, to work is not so much about that work, it's about what they're not doing when they're doing that, right? So they're not dealing with the other issues that are sort of not bothering them, whether it's relationship issues, it's reflection on my own actions, it's the tough stuff. So our compulsion to work reveals a developmental edge when we look at what are we avoiding by doing that. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. It was funny because yesterday my two kids were in different sports and whatever, so I had time for myself, and I decided to go to the library and read a book. So now I'm wondering, like, was I avoiding for some? And obviously, it was a business book, and people who follow me on Instagram, I share a lot of the books that I read there. So now I'm wondering, I'm like, was I avoiding something there or not?
And sometimes, work is just the pleasure of work. I enjoy my work, and it sounds like you too. And many of the people that we work with, the reason we work with them is because they are passionate and driven and care about this in an unreasonable way, right? You know, that's sort of what the beauty of it is. So no one can look objectively at someone else and say, "I think you're a workaholic because you work too much." You don't know. You
Yeah.
just don't know. But each individual for themselves, here are some things that we can take a look at. And I love the way you immediately kind of were reflecting on, oh, is there something I'm avoiding when I was doing that? So, like that is kind of like a high level marker,
Mm,
right? When you notice you consistently are kind of relieved to be working because it allows you relief from something else,
mm.
that's worthwhile noting. And I think all of us go through that at some point. Have you ever left the house like, I can't wait to get to the office so I don't have to deal with my family things anymore? Of
Oh,
course you have. I have. We all have. And one choice like that is nothing. But
mm,
when we look at our repeated choices, our repeated patterns, so when we notice that, for instance, as entrepreneurs who may manage a staff, who may manage a team,
mm,
and then also all of our client relationships. So let's say you consistently notice in those relationships that every time you put your own needs last.
mm,
That starts to become a pattern you can identify. It's like, oh, it wasn't just this time, was it? It wasn't that time. It was every time. I didn't even take into account my capacity as a resource in these business decisions. I discount the fact that I'm, working 60 hours a week just as
mm.
like that's normal. I can count
Yeah.
on that. So that's another cue is if you're treating your own time and your own sort of capacity as a resource that doesn't need to be protected like other people
Mm.
and other resources, that's a cue that something else is going on here besides just working from your sense of passion.
And I like how you also said you can't say it from the outside, because I remember once somebody telling me, Sarah, you work a lot. Like, we see you sometimes on weekends work. And I'm like, true. But what you maybe don't see is, like, during the week, I'm gone hiking or rock climbing during the day, or
Exactly.
that I'm,
Making something that works for you.
yes, or I'll be at the spa, or I used to be at my kids' volunteering school or whatever. So it's like you get to see that what I show, but you can't judge it on that. There's a topic that you bring a lot, and I find that and I'd like to go in that direction. There are motivational drivers.
Yes.
What is that?
Let's talk a little bit about that because when I started my firm, I had just worked for a startup entrepreneur, and he was awful as a manager
Mm,
and a boss. He was probably, like all the things that we say now about companies and the way they shouldn't be run. I have what I call a reverse mentor experience, right? So I had the experience of what not to do, and then I chose to do something different because I'd seen an example of what that looks like. So I had a motivational driver that was around building a company that was good for the employees and the owners of the employee. Like I believed in something could happen that would be exciting, and so that drive was really about creating something. Now, true, I did have a little bit, I'll prove you wrong kind of motivation. And also, I had to prove myself, like, is this true? I have this idea that things could be done this way. I don't really know. Let's prove it in the market. So there are lots of motivational drivers. We have an ideal about growing people at work. We have a driver about wanting to prove ourselves. At some point along the way, it became a driver of survival.
Mm.
Like, my whole livelihood and my family's livelihood is dependent. I really have to get this done.
Yes.
Right. So you can see the drift of our motivational drivers relates to the context that
Mm.
we're in right now. And let's say you just got funded and you have this big push because you have to get over a hump and prove something. And so, there's a real drive in that moment to accomplish a specific thing. But what you'll notice about the workaholic and those who have taken it too far
Mhm.
is it never ends. It never ebbs.
Mm.
There is always an urgent need that must supersede all the other needs in your life. It's more important than getting to the doctor. It's more important than all these other things, right? And so the driver is external to you and something that's so important that must be done, or it's internal, like my own fears and my own, but it becomes a compulsion and allows us to ignore the other areas of our life. And so, if we don't have hobbies outside of life in the sense of things that bring us joy, not hobbies to take your time, but things that you enjoy, that nurture you, that restore you, because then we start working on our empty. And then our motivational drivers just try to keep our nose above water so that we don't drown. And we're doing that without renewing ourselves. So what I would really encourage folks to do is to look at, let's say you are having a great time working on the weekend, jamming, doing your stuff, coming up with creative alchemy of your craft, whatever that is, and that feels great. Really make a note. What is driving you right now?
Mm.
When you're in that state, and my guess is it's going to be something that is, really expansive, that you want to connect to, that like that's where you want to hang out. But there's another driver that's usually more fear-based, more something that I'm trying to fill or to take care of or to satisfy. And I just keep coming back to work because it doesn't do it. It's not satisfying that way. So when you have a motivational driver that's mismatched with the work, it feels very different than when you have a motivational driver that's right there and it's satisfying and it's a match, right? That's the flow state.
Okay, so let's put this tangible. So let's say that what the motivational driver really is, um, I don't feel I'm enough.
Yes.
So I don't feel I'm doing enough. My business is not big enough. Like, how many
Yes.
entrepreneurs do I talk to? And I'm like, how do
Yeah,
you,
me too.
how are you satisfied with your business? Yeah, I'm not. Are you where you thought you'd be at this time? It's like, no, I thought my business would be bigger. I thought that I would have, there's this feeling of never enough. And
Yes.
that would be, if I don't know if I can say a negative motivational driver, because
A compulsion.
I I can never fill that gap.
Right.
Nothing external
Right.
from me will ever fill my feeling of not being enough.
Yes.
Being good enough, being smart enough, being successful enough, have enough money, have enough, like, nothing outside will ever will never match that
Right.
emptiness that I have inside.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
And so when we notice that, we can get off the hamster wheel. It's not that work isn't incredibly fulfilling for our self-worth. It
Mm.
is. I truly think one of the functions of work is to help us build our self-worth
Mhm.
of what we create in the world and what we contribute, and also how are we at being graceful leaders of service in the world. Like that's a pretty high order
Yeah.
pretty high calling. And when we're in this motivational driver of it's not enough, I have to prove myself, let me keep up with, hey, those guys had this success and I want something like that, we can see, you know, that's definitely not the most mature part of us.
No, but and okay, so where does it come from? It,
Where does what come from?
where does that driver come from?
Purpose.
Hmm.
The purpose that you're wanting to fulfill through your business is very personal, right? The purpose that you're wanting to fulfill through your business might be to address a specific cause, and perhaps it's a fundraising endeavor, right? I use businesses to fundraise for my interests. I'm interested in researching that. Hey, is there a client who would like me to research that? Sure. So I use my business as a way of helping me to fund the projects that I'm interested in, but they all relate to a purpose about growing people from work. So when you have a purpose to your business, I worked with a lawyer who had a very, social justice kind of purpose. I've worked, a construction firm that really believes in the craft of the trades. So, it doesn't really matter what the business is. It's finding for yourself and your own interests. What are your higher level purposes that
Mhm.
this business really serves? I appreciate that there's some excellent work being done right now on that. But when we look at our motivational drivers being of service in the world to our employees, to our stakeholders, that's the direction that we want to head for that kind of higher level work. It's sort of the antithesis of the workaholic. I just got to do this. I don't feel good, so I'm going to do some more of this and hope that it
Yeah,
helps.
it's never enough.
That's not the same kind of person, and we've all been all of it. It's in this moment I'm a a hamster on a wheel, and in this moment I can be very elevated and really working at a higher level. So I would say for all of us, understanding that you probably all wrestle with these different sides of our business and
Yeah,
ourselves.
and as a society, hustling and working the 80-hour week is also very glorified. So which and you something you talk a lot about it, the identity. So
Yes.
I worked and now eventually I'll reap the rewards, but apparently like that will just we keep on pushing that forward. But it's so part of our identity of, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a hustler, you work hard, you're driven. But I do now, like you said, there's different seasons in life. I do
Yes.
now believe that I can be driven without going onto the dark side
Yes.
of workaholism, of never, driven for by a lack instead of a purpose.
Yes. Yes. I love the way you said driven by a lack instead of a purpose.
Mhm.
Because when we're doing that, there's a way in which we think we're doing just the right thing. We're driven by this lack. We're trying everything we can to, plug that hole and take care of it and create what we're trying to create. But the toll is taken on our presence as a
Mhm.
leader, right? So the authentic presence of a leader who is on purpose, who is working from that purpose instead of the lack, you know those inspiring leaders. You've met them. And it is not a con game, right? That is a person who is in their power because they are in their leadership, because they are working from purpose
Mhm.
well. And they're reinvesting in themselves so they can show up as a grounded professional,
Yes.
conscious and aware, and not someone who's sleep deprived and hasn't been to the doctor in a few years and is kind of running on empty,
Mhm.
trying to be in the hamster wheel, right? So it degrades our presence as leaders when we are working on empty,
Mhm.
and our ability to tell when we're on empty, when we're operating out of lack and fear, we're starting on empty, right? And so we just lose our perspective.
So let's say there's an entrepreneur listening to us and says, I'm not sure what are my motivational driver. I'm not sure if I'm running from lack or from purpose. Because
Mhm.
sometimes we are in this like chaos and we're not quite sure what are the steps that they could do or questions that they can ask themselves to see what are their motivational drivers.
Yeah. One of the things that we want to run towards rather than away from is reflection. So many entrepreneurs are so action oriented. It is part of our gift. It's part of what makes us make things happen, right? We have an idea and then we're in action before we've even, you know, uh,
Yeah.
blinked. But
Or thought
here,
of the idea completely, but that's okay.
yes, exactly. And so it's
Okay.
one of our great gifts. And I say this completely connected to that philosophy, right? And so getting myself to reflect, to slow down enough to ask the question, what's really driving me right now?
Mm,
This is a real time leadership development tool for any entrepreneur.
mm,
You're at the beginning of the meeting. It is, 10:59 for your 11 o'clock meeting. You're sliding into the computer. You're taking your breath. You're thinking about what are the objectives you have and the things that you're going to cover, right? Now, take a moment, literally 1 minute between 10:59 and 11. If you are really want the extra credit, take a whole 5 minutes and actually write down what is driving me right
mm,
now. I want her to like me. I don't like this. I can't wait to get this done. I really want this off my to-do list. Whatever it is, just write a few sentences, just bullet points, whatever comes to mind. What's really driving me right now? Try that 2 or 3 times a day. And especially during those times when you sit down and there's a little bit of a, oh gosh, I don't want to have to do this kind of
or
feeling.
the I have to get this new client or get this deal,
Yes,
get the
the intensity.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, for me, intensity sometimes will feel a little panicky, like, like so my breath gets shallow,
yeah,
and see all of these things that we're talking about here. If you were to take a entrepreneurship leadership development course on the power that you have as an entrepreneur, the full discretion, the amazing things that you could create, it would start right here. It would start right here around what is driving you and how clear are you about what's driving you.
yes.
This is the work.
I uh, I love it because and now I'm like going in my head like several conversation with clients like throughout the time and where I think a lot of people don't know what's driving them.
Yes, this is it. And the reflection time is space of being,
Mhm.
not doing. So if I can take that space of being and make it into a to do, like here it is, it's a reflection thing. And what you do is this thing. People like that because it's a doing thing, but it
Yes.
creates a being space.
Mm.
And that being space is really asking and allowing yourself to receive knowledge without judging it. So the reason why we don't know ourselves that well is because we have all these judgments we're ready to lay on whatever comes up. It's like, why would we talk to ourselves if we keep judging ourselves? So, allowing when you ask, what's really motivating me, just allow that information to come through, capture it. Do that for a week and see what you get. See what surprises there are. See what you could do with that. Because when you look at what's motivating you, just like you would with any employee or friend, then you can be supportive.
I love, oh my gosh, I don't know if people are going to, and some people are going to get it, and I know some won't, but for the people who understand the power of that question, because if I ask myself, what's motivating me right now? It's like, I want to make money. Why do I, like, what's motivating me?
Yes.
Because I want to prove this person or prove that person, or I want to make more than this person. And that is a signal that I'm operating from lack and not
Yes.
from purpose.
Yes.
So
And
how can
you
we
will be
turn
less
it around?
effective.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. And I think there are times that we can use it. I remember when I started my business, somebody where I used to work said, you're gonna see this whole like coaching consultant thing won't work for her. Like give it like a year or two and she's gonna, get remarried and have another baby, and that's gonna be it. And I was like,
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah, just watch.
Yeah. And that at that moment was from a place of lack, but yet it was temporary. If I would
Right.
have continued on that track, then
It's a good motivational fuel boost. Sometimes we need to get angry.
yes,
Like I
time
think
return.
almost all entrepreneurial ventures started with this ain't right. We're
Yes,
going to do this different, like this there's something here that, needs to be changed, right? And could be better. So I think that that motivational fuel of anger is a great beginning, and you can't stay there or you burn out.
yes, and I think that's it. Is at one point there has to be this tipping point of saying, okay, what's motivating me now?
Yes.
What's the motive behind my action that I want to do right now? Because if it's always external, it will never be enough.
Right. And so we look at what breaks our heart and we say, this is what I'm going to do. And now we look at what fills our heart to sustain us in doing it. And so, for instance, in leaving my business, this is a heartfelt business, something I never thought I would depart from. And when I really look at what the business need and what I need, they diverged.
Mm.
And in order to really respect what I had built, it was time for there to be a new leader with different vision. And it was time in my world to do something that was calling me in a different direction. So to be able to be sensitive to the callings,
Yes.
we have to reflect on what's motivating us. And we realize, oh, that's not the same here for me anymore. And, most of the entrepreneurs that I have really enjoyed working with, they're constantly evolving themselves, right? They don't stay in one place.
No.
And so, this idea of checking in with your motivations is a part of the natural evolution of the life cycle of the business. Because when something you're like, hey, this is a violation of what I need to have happen, then you set the procedures, you attend to things, you take care of the systems that aren't in place. And so we balance between, hey, I can see something I need to address, and what's the bigger purpose that I stand for, and how do I put things in place so that's what's really supported?
So much. I remember talking with a client who was in wealth management, and I'm like, all right, so, you know, I work on the business strategy, but I work on the aligning the business with who you are,
Yes.
like not the other way around, which we tend to do. I do it like, let's align you and build a business around that. And I'm like, all right, so like, what do we want to like? Where do we want to build a business? He already been very successful and everything. He's like, well, okay, like I'd like to reach the $250 million of assets under management. I'm like, all right. I think he already had 200, but I'm like, are you saying that because you think that's what I want to hear? Or are you telling me that because
Hmm.
that's what you want? I'm like, it's
Hmm.
okay to be at 200 and say, I want to spend more time with my family, my wife, and my grandchildren.
Yeah.
He's
What
like,
really is success? Yes.
he was like, that's what I want. And I'm like, well, let's
Hmm.
take the $200 million business, which is a beautiful business in itself. Let's
Yeah.
restructure it so you have more time.
Beautiful. Sarah, you are brilliant and changing lives with
Mm.
that, because there is such a deep sort of cultural thread
Mhm.
around what does success mean,
Yeah.
and it is not coming from a sense of conscious awareness. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote The Conscious Professional, is because think of people have a separation between their business and who they are in business and what they stand for in business and their life. And entrepreneurship brings those together in a really clear and specific way. And it's the vanguard. These are pioneers
Mhm.
of where our society is heading. And so for them, for us to be able to question really out loud and specifically, what what speaks to me now? What
Yeah.
calls to me? And can I authentically align with that? And can we run great businesses around that? Of course we can. We
Course.
can run so much better businesses around that than, we have to make another 50 million because I said so.
Yes. And I believe, and I truly believe that that is how we truly contribute to the world,
Yes.
is by living in an alignment and yes, being passionate so we can be an example for others who are maybe have motivational drivers that are in the lack and saying, hey, he's doing that, she's doing that. And they're in alignment, they're happy, they're fulfilled, and they're showing other people how to be aligned and happy and fulfilled.
Exactly.
And
And
that's
I've
all of that.
just got a intuitive hit to also add in this other piece, Sarah, because the way I love the way you're seeing the whole person first and
Mm,
building the business in a support for them rather than turning us into slaves to the business,
yeah,
right?
no,
So none of us can see that as a future for humans that
mm,
makes sense. But when we are connecting and having that reflection time, there's another dimension, and that's the physical bodily dimension. As entrepreneurs, we do everything we can to ignore our bodies.
yes.
you know, we don't even take bio breaks the way we should with nutrition. And so when our body gives us a signal, like a clench in the gut, or our
Mm,
toes curled, or our fist clench, or our throat, these are communications
mm,
from ourselves to ourselves. And most of us have stopped listening some time ago. So, as this question about can we real time reflect on our motivations, I want to just make sure that you also pay attention to the nonverbal communication and hints that come from your body because you have a great somatic resource here and most entrepreneurs forget to use it. Now some of them are be like, oh, I never make any decisions without consulting my body. And in
mm,
fact, we've heard in the literature, the conscious leadership, the whole body yes. When something that you're wanting to do or idea that you get the full body yes, and you don't move forward until you do. Also, very good advice. But I want to encourage folks to not forget this instrument of our physicality as a way to help understand our motivations. And maybe even sometimes, if the narrative is, yeah, I
mm.
really like this, but the body is saying, I really don't like this, that you want to give some credence to the body.
Yeah, and if I can tap on to that and add on to that, because for many years, like I had no connection with my body, and I'm starting back again. And someone, a friend of mine who's also a coach, recommended. She goes, Sarah, start with small decisions, like what do I feel for lunch?
Hmm.
Don't go like, oh, should I make this deal or not?
Right.
Start with small, and like intuition is a muscle
Hmm.
that we get to train. So
Yes.
small decisions and say, okay, well, like, what do I want for lunch? How do I feel about this thing? And then from
Yes.
there, we get to understand how our own intuition works, what our own intuition signals are.
Yes. And
And
the difference between our own intuition signals and the logic narrative in our brains, because those are different things. And when we consider ourselves as a whole being with many parts,
mhm,
do I have my killer business instincts? Sure. Do I have my heartfelt entrepreneur? Do I have my mom and all of these are myself,
yeah,
right? So when you are generous with your professional identity, you will see that you have many selves with different motivational drivers and calibrating and aligning that to what is happening now in my world and life, what is happening now in my business for my clients, in our ecosystem. This is that moment when we're truly present with ourselves and what is ours to do as leaders in the world. And we train ourselves by doing that exact thing, as sort of saying, who am I in relationship to lunch? You know, am I the power broker? Am I the nutritionist? Who am I right now? You know, like what would feel good? And so allowing ourselves to be who we are is the first choice, and then to build businesses and lives and communities and societies around how life can be, and
Yeah,
it
and
can
I
be
think
pretty
when
darn good.
that alignment again comes back to the beautiful question you brought is, what's motivating me?
Yeah.
What's my motivation behind that? And if,
Hmm.
the more I bring into alignment, well, the more I'll actually get what my true motivational driver is and say, okay, do I want to continue the path of more and
Yes.
hustle and being bigger and ranking bigger than this person or whatever? Or am I going to be, you know what? Because at the end, we just want to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that choice can be yours
Mm,
is truly the fun part of entrepreneurship, isn't it?
so
Thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate knowing the conscious professional community that you're building, and just the idea of how we are examining our motivations in the world as we build businesses. This is the leadership, the development that I hope for. You know, this is why I do what I do as a leadership development thought leader, is
Yeah,
around how we grow up more as humans from
definitely.
work.
It definitely. Jessica, if people want to know more about you, what you do, how you help people, and your book and everything, where can they find you online?
I am on LinkedIn, Jessica Hartung, and jessicahartung.com. And I also do have a book site at consciousprofessional.com. And actually, at consciousprofessional.com, if you go there, you can download the first chapter for free. And that gives folks a nice introduction. I really wrote this book as an on ramp to folks who are wanting to use their work, just while it's happening, as
Yes.
the case study for their leadership. And so it's written for anybody at any level to do that. And I've had, executives and administrative assistants all tell me, wow, that did transform my life at work. So I would be delighted to share that with anyone. And I love to talk with groups. Particularly, I work with executive um, uh, development in women's groups. Chief.com is a leadership group for women executives that I particularly have worked with. But entrepreneurs are some of my favorites. So yes, stay in touch, and I do really enjoy this opportunity, Sarah. It's just a treat to talk to you and to hear about the fabulous work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. What a beautiful conversation. I swear, like these questions for me are sticking with me for a long time. Because for many years, I could have said, like we mentioned in the interview, what drove me was, that person who said she's not going to make it, that person who said, well, like she's a woman and whatever, or and for a while, but we can't last on that. It has to have an end date. And when we flip it around and we go from passion, purpose, meaning, we don't need to work as hard because it has nothing to do with the hustling. It has everything to do with the being and showing up, stepping up to what's really important for us and the message that we really carry. And from that we can do it from the spa. We can do it we don't have to work as much and do as much because we need to step up and be as much as who we're supposed to be. And from that place, that's where we see that so much more is possible. Thank you for being here week after week, and I will see you next Tuesday.